April the 25th, 1915, men of the Australian and New Zealand Army Corps landed at Gallipoli. It was on that day the traditions of our fighting forces were born. These stories of their sons and daughters at war we proudly dedicate to the memory of Anzac.
This is the story of the capture of a great Japanese base and of 2 victories by Australia's 9th Division, which unleashed the great Allied drive towards Japan in 1944. This is the story of Finschhafen and Saddleburg. At Finschhafen in September 1943, Japan regrouped its main forces in the Huon Peninsula and prepared to bar the Allied thrusts in New Guinea and next to New Britain. Possession of Finschhafen, dominating the straits, was vital to these thrusts. Well, the Japanese knew it. They knew, too, after their defeats of that year, that the jungle, which wrecked their own offensives, did not deter Australia. They prepared for bitter siege warfare. They also planned counterattacks when the assault began. Tensely, they waited. Lae had fallen to the Australians on September the 16th. Let's go back a moment. This great campaign had begun when American paratroopers and Australian artillerymen were dropped on Nadzab and seized the airstrip. The enemy had been taken completely by surprise. Then Australian 7th Division infantry were flown into Nadzab and had fought their way down the Markham Valley towards Lae. The road to Tokyo began at Lae. Meanwhile, the 9th Division had landed at Red Beach to the north and attacked along the coast. Lae fell. Immediately, the Australian field commanders, Wootton, Herring, Mackay, Moorshead, Milford, Daisy, planned the next hammer blows. After the 2 divisions met at Lae, the 7th Division was to move up the Markham and Ramu valleys towards Madang. The 9th Division was to land in another amphibious assault at Scarlet Beach, attack back along the coast, and capture Finschhafen. Then its task was to clear the Huon Peninsula of Japs and open the coast road to Madang. There would be no rest for the men of the AIF, no respite for the enemy. 6 days after Lae fell, American landing craft beached at the Burep River, and the vanguard of the 9th Division embarked on its second daring amphibious operation. The vanguard, once again, was the 20th Brigade. These New South Welshmen and Queenslanders of the 2nd, 13th, 15th and 17th Battalions, veterans of the siege of Tobruk and of Alamein, had been the 1st Brigade ashore at Red Beach less than 3 weeks before. There they had landed without opposition. But there would be no surprising the enemy this time. The 90-mile voyage was uneventful, but as the convoy neared Scarlet Beach, enemy aircraft began to shadow it. Scarlet Beach at the mouth of the Song River is roughly 6 miles north of Finschhafen. The plan was to bypass Finschhafen, land at Scarlet Beach at dawn on September the 22nd, and fight back along the coast to Finschhafen. The bombardment began at dawn. The infantry moved into the shore under heavy enemy fire. By 8 a.m., the 20th Brigade had stormed the enemy's beach bunkers. The advance to Finschhafen began immediately. The New South Welshmen and Queenslanders pushed relentlessly down the narrow coastal strip towards their prize. Their assault hurled enemy units from their emplacements. Behind them, the 2nd 12th Field Regiment pounded the base. At Scarlet Beach, supplies were landed. The brigade had only 15 days' supplies to support the lightning blow at Finschhafen. From the beach, supplies were manhandled forward to the assault troops. The attack drove forward against cunning, fanatical resistance. There were ridges, which made the supply problem even more difficult. Here, the Queenslanders routed enemy Marines with bayonets and grenades. 50 Marines died. The others fled or were captured. This prisoner, outmaneuvered, outfought, didn't try to conceal his resentment. The advance was not achieved without cost. For these wounded men, the road back to Scarlet Beach was long and agonizing. Enemy aerial bombardment intensified. In the 65 days of this savage offensive, there were 115 raids on the 9th Division. Our planes were active too, in attack, in flying supplies, in aiding communication. This boomerang drops a message to the forward troops. By October, Finschhafen was ripe for capture. The forward battalions prepared to carry the last ridge, a jungle eyrie covered by machine guns. While the attack was planned, artillery moved up to blast the enemy foxholes. New South Welshmen of the 2nd 13th Battalion made a brilliant outflanking move. Meanwhile, the Queenslanders attacked frontally. The Japanese expected an artillery duel. They got it. But they didn't expect the 20th Brigade's direct assault against overwhelming odds. The Japanese paid for their mistake. Finschhafen fell on October the 2nd. But the battle for the Huon Peninsula had only begun. Western Australians and South Australians of the 24th Brigade probed inland after they reached Scarlet Beach. They established that the main enemy force had fortified Saddleberg Mountain 9 miles inland in a wilderness of jungle. Now the 9th Division had to move its strength from Scarlet Beach inland across hazards like this, to scale a 3,300-foot fortress manned by 11,000 Japanese soldiers. The advance towards Saddleberg began. Heavy responsibility fell on the engineers of the 2nd 3rd Field Company and the 2nd 1st Mechanical Equipment Company. Their bulldozers had to clear crossings and back up river silt to make bridge foundations. Men like these paved the way to victory. Some of the deeper rivers had to be bridged. Sometimes a jeep with chains could manage a ford. But it couldn't negotiate the jungle without tracks. Coral, dredged from near Scarlet Beach, was ideal for all-weather roads. This was the Saddleberg Road, a part of the road to Tokyo. For the soldiers, the Huon Peninsula was no more than a strategic area to be cursed and captured. But for these unhappy people, it was home. Day after day, natives like these, the old and the young, straggled into the Australian perimeter to seek security, medicine, food and attention. For these weary, despondent people, the battle that was now imminent was a battle of liberation. Australia had another surprise for the enemy. British Matilda tanks, armed with quick-firing cannon and heavy machine guns. New South Welshmen of the 1st Tank Battalion were at Morobe, waiting to be called into action at Lae. But again the war had passed them by. Again they returned to the frustrating routines of maintenance and training. Then, out of the blue, the 9th Division called for armor. The 1st Tank Battalion's 56 tanks were ready, and some of them were on their way to Finschhafen with the 26th Brigade. These were the tanks of C Squadron, brought forward on American landing barges. Sergeant Dudgeon reports, "All aboard, sir." And soon, with Troopers Small, Brown and Eckersley, his tank is on its way. It's joined by others of C Squadron. At sea, the American landing craft crews keep watch. The crews of the Matildas relax as the 18 tanks are carried forward. Tank country? It didn't look like it. On October the 20th, the Matildas disembarked at Langemak Bay, south of Finschhafen. There was no time to be wasted. The landing craft dared not linger and risk air attack. C Squadron had only 1 hour to get their tanks ashore and under cover. The tanks' chance came on November the 17th, as the fresh troops of the 26th Brigade began the attack on Saddleberg. With the tanks goes the 2nd 48th Battalion. Lieutenant Bob Alexander leads his platoon forward. Their spearhead tank is commanded by Captain Downs from Camden. In thick jungle on Coconut Ridge, the tanks smashed their first opposition, a heavy machine gun post. Then the advance was resumed. For 9 days, the infantrymen were to edge forward, fighting for ridge after ridge. White Rock Ridge, Green Ridge, Coconut Tree, Kunai Knoll, Fugas Corner. These are names they will never forget. The enemy hit back. He dug tank traps. He exploded landslides to halt the tanks. Now the 2nd 48th is held up. Captain Morfitt and Lieutenant Curtain call the tanks again. Major Sam Horton gets the message. While the tanks move into position, the infantry snatch a meal. A slice of bully beef, a cup of tea. The attack goes in again. Although wounded, Doug Marr from Renmark fights on. A direct hit put this tank's 2-pounder out of action and wounded the gunner. By November the 24th, the 2nd 48th was only 400 yards from the mission on the summit. The infantry had left the tanks behind. Now it was bayonets and grenades against the machine guns. Our casualties grew heavier. In this battle, the 26th Brigade lost 49 dead and 118 wounded, but enemy losses were far heavier. Many men were wounded when the 2nd, 23rd and 24th Battalions tried attacks from the flanks. On November the 24th, the 2nd 48th attacked in driving rain up the greasy 45-degree escarpment. These were the white coral ramparts of Saddleberg Mountain itself. Climbing, slipping and slithering, the men toiled forward and upward. The Japanese guarded every approach. They swept the slopes with machine gun fire and rolled hand grenades down on the attackers. Reinforcements were brought forward to replace the wounded and to bring forward supplies for the attacking companies, where every movement spelled death. In a last onslaught, almost in darkness, the South Australians shattered the summit defences. Saddleberg, with its ruined Lutheran mission, was ours. On November the 25th, fresh supplies for the weary 26th Brigade came unhindered to the mountain top. The enemy had fled overnight. The victors could look across a tangle of ranges to the coast and northwards where 24 Brigade held and broke a counterattack. Here there was peace in a scene of utter destruction. But there was comfort, and comfort parcels in the ruins. Val Bevis of the YMCA with cigarettes, chocolates, chewing gum, clean socks, fresh razor blades, gifts from home. You cleaned up the Japs, then afterwards yourself. You cleaned up your weapons. There were the dead to be honored and buried. This lonely mountain top from now on would carry a tragic loading of neat white crosses. One man, Sergeant Tom Derrick, here being interviewed by war correspondents, won imperishable fame in the last onslaught. Single-handed, he charged and knocked out 10 foxholes. His reward for valor was the Victoria Cross. Months later, new officers were commissioned at OC2, the Officer Cadet Training Unit. Head of the class was 7 Division's twice-decorated Sergeant Teddy Bear of Essendon, Victoria. Another was Tom Derrick, orchardist of Bury, South Australia. Diver Derrick, BC DCM of Saddleberg. A third was 6th Division Sergeant R.W. Saunders, Australia's first Aboriginal officer. The ceremony ended with family congratulations. Derrick and Saunders shook hands. Saunders became a captain, but 3 months before Japan surrendered, Derrick died from wounds received while repelling a vicious counterattack on a ridge he and his men had captured from the Japanese at Tarakan in Borneo. One year after Finschhafen, the 9th Division paraded on Atherton tableland before Major General Wootton. Senior commanders who accompanied his inspection included Brigadier D.A. Whitehead, who at 21 commanded a unit in the 1st AIF and who now commanded the 26th Brigade. Then awards were presented. To Major Hertel Morfitt of the 2nd 48th, the Military Cross. Lance Corporal Mick Scanlon, also of the 2nd 48th, the most decorated battalion of the 2nd AIF, the Military Medal. To Private A.R. Stewart of the 2nd 48th, a trapper from Bathurst, the Order of the Red Star. The Order of the Red Star? Yes, it was Russia's way of congratulating the 9th Division. Saddleberg. After Saddleberg, the 24th Brigade attacked Warrior. Wario fell on December the 9th. Then the 20th Brigade pressed on to Sio. The 5th Militia Division took up the advance. At Sidor, they linked with U.S. troops who'd been landed there to cut off the retreating Japanese. Many men in these so-called militia units had long ago joined the AIF. Many were as seasoned in jungle fighting as the men from the Middle East. Their lightning thrust now proved their worth. In vicious fighting against fortified river barriers, the 4th Brigade outpaced the tanks. Before the 5th Division linked up with the Americans of the 32nd Division, it covered 97 grueling miles in 16 days. By April the 26th, the Australians had captured Madang and Alexishafen, and the Huon Peninsula had been cleared of the enemy. For the Huon tribes, this was the end of a cruel occupation and a ruinous war. They celebrated with the biggest festival remembered in New Guinea. It took place at Finschhafen. Those Australians who saw it will never forget this outpouring of pent-up emotion in age-old rituals of joy and thanksgiving. In many campaigns in Papua and New Guinea, the Fuzzy Wuzzy had rendered brave and loyal service to the Australians. Here was a chance to repay some of our debt. The work of rehabilitation and reconstruction could begin. Work for the specially trained Australian New Guinea Administration Unit, ANGAR. ANGAR medical units would have a long fight against the bitter harvest of occupation. The women brought their children, tots born since the Japanese arrived. This tot was by no means sure that the new regime was a good thing. Open, please. Nothing wrong there. See you next year. Vocational training began again on a scale never before attempted. Natives learned to rebuild their villages the Australian way. Able-bodied natives were drafted into work parties to restore the shattered area to health and prosperity. ANGAR vehicles took them to new building sites, new cropping areas. Special schools were set up. This one trained men whose fathers had lived as in the Stone Age to be medical orderlies in the hospitals of the 20th century. Quickly, the villages began to spring to life again. With peace, the prospect of prosperity returned. Youth once more could enjoy itself. No swords were beaten into plowshares, but at village schools an old aeroplane cylinder could serve admirably as a gong. The trained natives helped the untrained with their new skills. Many who were too old to learn new skills would pursue their traditional crafts until the end of their days. The wise ones were women like these who learned to sew Western style. Many of the natives, enthusiastic for the defeat of Japan, volunteered to fight. They learned quickly and became jungle scouts the Japanese had reason to fear. But now Finschhafen was being developed into a great base for the American drive northwards towards Japan. Ships berthed at new wharves and poured supplies into the new Allied arsenal and commissariat. Finschhafen, weeks before a burned husk of a town, began to throb with energy and purpose. From Finschhafen, the Americans would soon attack and capture Arawe. As always, the Royal Australian Navy was there. The Americans would take Cape Gloucester and leapfrog to Hollandia. These American and later Australian victories were made possible by the capture of Finschhafen. They were made possible by the courage and sacrifice of the men of the 9th Division, whose achievements in Australia's Anzac tradition destroyed nearly 8,000 veteran Japanese soldiers, liberated an enslaved population, and won a springboard for new Allied victories.